NBA draft. We're talking prospects, and we're talking some guys that I am really, really interested to hear about. Bub Carrington, Tyler Smith. In fact, we're going to be talking about those guys with another Tyler Metcalf. But he's not here yet. It's only Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, or is it Twitter, or is it X, or whatever we're calling it these days. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at LockedOnFantasyBasketball. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available for you to double bang on all platforms. Here to talk NBA draft again. That is the last and only time I will ever say Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it. Just call it what you want to call it. We call it Twitter, yeah. We're not calling it X. No one calls it X. I think if you refer to it, I saw this on X. I don't know. I just go, nah, don't want to hear about it. But maybe that's me. Am I showing my biases? Yes, we all have them. And we're going to talk about some biases. We're going to talk about draft prospects. And we're going to do that with Tyler Metcalf from No Ceiling. So let's bring him in. All right, so he's back again. Tyler Metcalf is here from No Ceilings. Tyler, I've got a very important question to begin this show with you. How do you feel about the name Tyler just invading the NBA draft space? You've got your colleague, obviously, Tyler Rucker. You've got a couple of Tylers who are going to go in the first round of this draft. Is Tyler becoming the new Jalen?
I mean, it feels like that. It feels like a great name to be associated with, and like you mentioned, they're just a lot better people that I'm allowed to associate myself with just because of the name. So it's a revolution, as you could say.
Unfortunately for me, the NBA Joshes, Josh Jackson and Josh Primo, and that hasn't worked out particularly well for my name.
You got Josh Okogie.
Josh Okogie, yes, offensive legend, Josh Okogie. This is not many, but like the strike rate there on Josh's in the NBA is not particularly high. Surely, Josh Giddey as well. Off court legends associated with my name. So yeah, maybe we'll just leave that one to the side for now. We are here to talk draft prospects, and there are a couple of guys that I'm very, very interested. I said it already in the intro to this show that I'm very interested to talk to you about in this episode. Tyler, we're going to start with Bub Carrington. You may see his name written down as Carlton Carrington, but this is a Nashon Highland type scenario, isn't it, where everyone just calls him Bub?
Yeah, and if you want to even be a little more technical about it, Lil Bub, because I guess his dad is Bub, so he always grew up being called Lil Bub Carrington. But yeah, Carlton Carrington, point guard for the Pittsburgh Panthers, one of the real pleasant surprises from this year, where I don't think anyone was really expecting him to be a one and done. He comes out the gate dropping multiple triple doubles in a row, just really impressive stuff to start the season. Went through a bit of a lull. Finished the season really strong, very skinny. It'll be really shocking if he's a big time contributor as a rookie, but the long-term upside based on what he showed this year at Pitt is really, really fun.
I'm going to put on idiot Josh hat. I'm going to put on casual Josh, which people will just be saying, that's just your show, mate, all the time. But I'll put that on to ask you this question. I'll play the character. So we go, okay, he's got the fake first name, nickname going. He is a skinny combo guard, point guard guy who's got these scoring outbursts. He's fun. He's jubilant. Why is he not Bones Highland?
Oh boy. Yeah. I mean, the easy answer is that he was doing all this as a freshman at a big time school, whereas Bones had a little bit more of a prolonged journey and never really put on the weight that he needed to. Whereas I think Carrington has a little more promising frame. I think Carrington's playmaking has been way more advanced than Bones ever was. And I think that his defense took really important strides throughout the season that we never really saw from Bones either.
I think, again, there's always, and I'm always really interested in this sort of stuff from, I guess, human perspective. Not that I like humans, but just as a human perspective, talking about the psychology around things, because I look at Bub Carrington and go, oh, it's Bub. That's the name you give to someone who's small, they're little, they get by. He's Muggsy Bogues, like he's small. You go, no, he's actually big. He's 6'5", he's 18. Like he's big. Like he's got size. Yeah, and you said he's got to put on weight, but passing through some of these, like again, the mental initial association, the size concerns, like people just go, well, look, he's fun, he's bubbly, he's going to put up these big scoring numbers. He's a defensive liability, but is he a true, like, is he a point guard? Is he a, not the dreaded combo guard? Is he a big point guard, which is what really NBA teams want?
Yeah, and I do think he is. I think he's got that trajectory where he is going to be a legitimate, true point guard. And at that size, that's exactly what you want from that position. And it may take a couple of years, because that's a really, really hard position to translate from level to level. You know, from high school to college is an extreme jump, and from college to the NBA is an even more astronomical one. So when it's always so frustrating when everyone just is so eager to write off these rookie point guards who struggle, but they have to take on so much in such a short amount of time, where they don't really have a training camp. Their entire summer before their rookie year is draft workouts and interviews and flying all over the country and doing all this pre-draft stuff that they don't really have an off season to improve. It's all interviewing, basically. So that first rookie year is really hard, but you give it a couple years, and that's when stuff really starts to pop and really starts to shine as the game slows down. And when we look at Carrington, I mean, he thrived in the pick and roll this year. Tremendous playmaker. You know, there are obviously holes that he has to improve on, like any freshman, but the stuff that we look for from point guards, he has it. He has positional size, on-ball shooting, shot creation, playmaking. He has all of it. So is it going to be there in his rookie year? Probably not, because it's really hard to do. But long-term, that's what the draft is about. And I am really, really excited about what the type of player that he could grow into.
This class, we know, is a bit light on freshmen. He is one of the freshmen. We're going to talk about quite a few freshmen actually in this show today. He's on the younger side, so he's got that develop. In 2 years' time, he's going to be 2 years younger than what Dalton Connect is now. Like that's, we're talking about development curves and where you're at with that, and giving the time for someone to develop. I'm pretty interested in this. Now, a name, maybe you can dispel me of this, but when I look at some of the numbers and I look at the size and I look at maybe trajectory, I think of someone who went way higher in their draft class, and that's Darius Garland, who had some struggles obviously in the playoffs, but is an all-star in the NBA and is a good passer, can score, can shoot, didn't have a huge college sample, but like that sort of longer term trajectory, I think that's sort of something that I look at for Bub being able to do. Whether he gets there, who knows? But like we're talking about, do you have the individual measurements, skills, size, development trajectory to get there? And in a class like this, I don't see many guys who have that ability to push into that level that I would prefer over Bub.
Yeah, and it's always tricky, doing comps, especially with guys that young and that kind of raw, like Bub. And like one of the guys that I've kind of kept going to with Bub has been like a Reggie Jackson type player. And that's not necessarily the ceiling that I'm envisioning, but like a 70th percentile outcome with him. But when we were talking about 90th, 95th percentile outcomes with him, I don't think that Darius Garland shout is an awful one, because we see that kind of same shiftiness, that ability to explode out of a hang dribble, to navigate a pick and roll, to collapse a defense and kick out to shooters, to get to the rim, but then keep his head up and play make for others, along with that kind of slight frame, and struggles finishing around the rim. So if he can get to Darius Garland levels of offense, that would be an absolutely incredible outcome for him. I do think he has higher upside defensively, though, based on how we saw his defense kind of progress throughout the season, the potential for strength gain with his frame, and just kind of natural size and build already. So if he can kind of get to 80% of Darius Garland on offense, but then kind of continue to bulk up, get stronger, and improve on the defensive end, we're talking about a heck of a player and probably one of the guys who would be one of the biggest steals from this draft.
Yeah, I think even when I did my first lottery mock, I didn't have him in there. I think I'm going to push him a little bit close to that when I do it. I haven't sat down and done it yet. But so it doesn't just sound like we're doing a full Bub glazing session here, Tyler. I want to talk about, like, I don't know if you've seen the site, but I've talked about it a lot on this show. It's by what's the guy's name? I think it's Wizzy. He does the NBA draft comp site. Yep. So
Great site.
The advanced comparisons for Bub Carrington. Now, the similarity of them is not particularly high. It's all about 75, so it's not huge. But some of the names are a little concerning. Some of them are great. So the first one is James Young, who was 19 coming out of Kentucky, did absolutely nothing. Caleb Houston, who's just really been a shooter in Orlando. Tyrese Proctor. Brandon Knight. Oh, we're getting a little bit warmer there. Lonnie Walker. He's not a point guard. And then we get to Tyrese Maxey. And then I go, okay, that's very interesting. Then we get to original, old Tim Hardaway. And I go, okay, we're not fully there, like in terms of similarity, but there's a mix of, and I think that speaks to the Bub Carrington experience, is the mix of what different sort of players we could get out of him, whether he is this guy that can develop into that lead guard fully, or if he just becomes sort of a guy that you hope can and never does. And I think that do any of those comparisons strike you as interesting or weird?
Yeah, I mean, I always find comparisons fascinating, especially when we go like based on size, and we get like real old school ones compared to how the game is kind of continuing to shift and change. That Tim Hardaway that's a fun one. Yeah. But the thing that, I mean, when you see names like Tim Hardaway and Tyrese Maxey, it's hard not to get really excited because those guys are awesome. But where I think Carrington really kind of differs and really, really fails to hit those levels of player is when we look at the rim pressure and at rim finishing stuff. And that's where he really struggled. And that's where the slight frame really became an issue this year, and he's only in the 27th percentile shooting at the rim and shot below 51% overall. Those are really worrying numbers. He was awesome as a pull-up shooter, awesome in the mid-range, awesome from outside in totality, which is great. But if you can't finish at the rim, if you can't get there, if you're not strong enough to get to your angles, to get to your spots, to get to the rim, to finish through contact, to draw fouls, you become a lot easier to guard. And when names like Tyrese Maxey come up, that's the evolution. That's where we've seen his kind of quickness really punish defenses, because he's so fast. He's figured out those extension finishing angles, and Carrington is so far away from that. So I love those names. They're a blast, but Carrington has to figure out how to really improve as an at-rim finisher and as a foul drawer. And his free throw rate was under 25 this year, which is really concerning for a lead ball handler. So he's very perimeter based, and developing that kind of at-rim stuff is doable. But it takes time, it takes a mentality shift, and it takes a really important physical development as well.
And that's where we're at basically with this entire class. As you look at these things, you go, yeah, but. It's like everyone's been, yeah, but. I could talk about Carrington, I feel, all day. One quick question. I'll give you a 20-second answer from this. Yeah. Is he the best player from Pitt since Steven Adams? I can't think of anyone else.
Oh, probably.
I can't think of. I'm sure there's someone else, but I can't think of anybody else.
I feel like I'm blanking on someone, but yeah, I mean, Steven Adams has had a heck of a career, so yeah, probably.
All right. Anyway, that was just something that came to mind. We're going to get back and talk about a guy that I am actually higher on than Bub Carrington, higher on than most people, and I'm very excited to talk about this next guy. But firstly, let's tell you about PrizePicks, because they are today's sponsor. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. You watch the action, and then you watch your favorite sports and players, and you pick more or less on 2 or up to 6 individual players of their individual stats. You put them into an entry, and bang, Bob's your uncle. We've got the playoffs in the NBA. We've got the playoffs in NHL. We've got baseball. We've got so many different sports. You can all throw on the old disc golf over there as well. I'm sure disc golf season is rolling around at the moment. And actually, at the moment, you can win up to 100 times your entry. $10 in, $1,000 out, with as little as 4 correct picks on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. The app is PrizePicks, so download it. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It is that easy. there is a lot of negativity around prospects coming out of the G League Ignite. We have seen these guys, all we think they're going to go here, and then they fall undrafted into the second round, 5 spots lower, 2 spots lower, whatever. They always seem to fall. They always have these bad shooting numbers. I've discovered this. I hadn't really seen it mentioned anywhere. I'm sure it has, but basically every player coming out of the Ignite had really quite poor three-point shooting numbers, but nearly every single one of them improved significantly in their first 2 to 3 years in the NBA. Even someone like Scoot, who didn't shoot well, still shot 33% from 3. Dyson Daniels, Jalen Green, John Kuminga, everyone's been able to improve their three-point shooting. And my hypothesis on this has always been, not always, because I only discovered this 3 weeks ago, but it's been that they're playing against grown men, transitioning straight high school to NBA line versus the slow progress high school college NBA, and it just kills them. And that three-point numbers are way down. Everyone goes, oh, mate, they can't shoot. All these guys, they can't shoot. What this program doesn't instill winning trends or whatever. And then it takes them a little bit of time in the NBA. So, we're not going to have this problem anymore because the G League Ignite is done. But I look at this next guy, and people have seen the graphic already. It's Tyler Smith. I've got him in the top 10. All right, I don't love this class as a general rule, but a guy like this, much like maybe it's just that maybe I have a type because I was big on Taylor Hendricks last season. Hey, you can shoot threes. Maybe you're big. Maybe you can rebound. Maybe you can protect the rim. Now he's not really the defender that Taylor Hendricks is, quite obviously, but this is a guy that 25-9 per 40 minutes, pace adjusted. He's 6'11". He's 19, 1.5 steals, 1.6 blocks, shoots threes. I'm intrigued. I want a guy like this who is, and he is one of the G League guys who actually shot the ball well playing for the Ignite. And I go, okay, well that's really encouraging. Does that translate even further? I am a little worried about where it is defensively, but and I've got this hypothesis as well. We know guards are important and wings are important, but the player that so many teams look for is like, hey, who's a guy that can play the 4 and who can shoot a little bit and can space the floor and maybe he can defend? Hey, it would be great if we could get ourselves an Aaron Gordon. What if we could get OG Anunoby? I'm not saying he's that guy and he's not that level of defender, but that body, that size, that shooting, it opens everything up. So I don't know why we're seeing Tyler Smith. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, because this is your name brother. Where does why is he just down so low? Is it just the stench of the Ignite? Is it the defensive concerns? Because I love I love the idea. I love some of the production, and I think that this is just the sort of guy that if it works, it sets you up so well for building a team.
Yeah, and I think the key there, and like that last sentence you said, is you love the idea.
Yes.
And with this draft specifically, 99% of these guys are, do you love the idea or not? And if Tyler Smith if you're all in, I don't think late lottery is that absurd. And I do think that he's been the big winner of this Ignite crew, where we continue to see questions pop up around everyone, but Smith had a really kind of simple game. And I don't mean that as an indictment. I mean as a compliment, because he played to his strengths. He did what he was good at, and he found his spots to impact the team and impact the game. So yeah, there are a lot of holes in his game, but what he is he's big, he can shoot the crap out of the ball, and he's really athletic. You can work with that. It's really, if you have those 3 things, it's a lot easier to make a roster than if you don't. Where he needs to improve, it's the defensive end. And I think it's kind of that positional uncertainty with him, where it's, can he be a full-time 5? Does he need to be a 4? I don't think he can play center. I think the defense is really concerning. But then if you have him at like the 4, do you trust him enough to defend on the perimeter? Because that was really brutal as well. So when you have that size and athleticism, though, it gets a little easier to kind of hide a guy like that, especially given some of the weak side shot blocking and rim protection stuff that he showed throughout the season. And that's the part of his defense that feels like it will be immediately translatable to at least an average level. So if you can kind of keep him as that low man, have him roam, protect the rim like that, then it's like, okay, now you can survive. Now we can really utilize you as a spot up shooter, transition scorer, potential pick and pop guy too.
Now, you can't see this because I'm having computer issues in terms of sending graphics, but people who are watching the screen can see this, and people have heard me talk about it. The G League guys aren't included in the Wizzy player comparison app, but I did my own sort of work on finding that comparison in terms of the shape of the player statistics. And you mentioned it there, a guy that he works in transition, takes threes, mid-20s usage, all of the numbers, the size, all that sort of stuff, the similarities came out as Brandon Miller. Now, he's obviously not the prospect that Brandon Miller is. He's a very different, he's quite a different player, but he came out as Brandon Miller, which I think also pushes towards it like he's probably a 4 or 3, then he's got to somehow find a way to defend on the perimeter. So that was really interesting to me. Even the way that you just described him as a shooter and scorer, there's a little bit of what Brandon Miller was doing at Alabama that's in that. But the next part of it, we put on casual Josh again. He's like, look at this, I'm 6'11", not sure how you defend. Can you play center? You shoot the ball well. Your name is Smith. You might go in the lottery. Is he Jalen Smith? Like that's I guess the concern of like he's that guy where the idea is there, but like it hasn't really worked in practice.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. I think what sets him apart from a lot of these kind of tweener 4 or 5 type guys where it's like, oh man, if he ever learns how to shoot, he's gonna be awesome. I don't think we have to worry about him learning how to shoot. I think he's just going to be a really good shooter, or at least above average shooter, especially for his position for the bulk of his career. It's just how much does he grow on defense? Because he's really athletic. You just mentioned the size. That alone allows you to do so much more than if he was, 4 inches shorter. So just that baseline gives him such an advantage compared to a lot of other guys in this draft and of that kind of similar mold where he already has the kind of play finishing stuff on offense where he can be a roll finisher. He can be a pick and pop guy. He can rim run. He can spot up in the corner. He can run in transition. Now just can you get to average on defense? And that's all he really has to do. And everything I've heard is that the intel with him has been phenomenal, where he's super self-aware. He knows what he's good at. He knows what he's not. And he's not trying to play outside of that. And he's working on improving the areas of his game, which he needs to. And that is really encouraging. So I think he's almost oddly kind of safe. And in this draft, that's really encouraging.
It is. Now, this is when I did my lottery mock the day of the lottery, I was like, okay, there's defensive concerns. I love the size, the shooting, the positional value is there. There's a team here that's picking in the top 10 that has someone that might be able to cover up some of the defensive issues and maybe want someone that can shoot next to him, and that's the San Antonio Spurs. And they've got pick number 8, and that is obviously really early because he's getting mocked in the 20s. But I go like, okay, if anyone's going to protect him defensively, like Wemby's going to be behind him. Like, that's pretty good, yeah. And we already heard a report literally today about the Spurs willing to move on from Keldon Johnson. Like, yeah, they are. Of course, he's not good enough, and they should be willing to move, and they should have moved on from. I'm so anti-Keldon. I'm completely out on him, but that is opening up those minutes at the forward position and getting somebody who can come in and shoot in space. Like again, maybe he's not the 8th best player, but I just think that the fit there is going to be really important, and there's no one better, I don't think, to protect someone defensively than Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, and that would be just a little bit of a reach for me, but like you said, when we talk about fit, I mean, you're building a team. So, whether it's a reach or not, who cares if you're building or if you put in the right pieces in place. And at that 8th spot, we've seen a guy of kind of a similar archetype in Tijan Saloon get mentioned there all the time. And I think Saloon is way more theoretical and has a much higher variance for, what his outcome could be than Tyler Smith. So if they're just sold on Tyler Smith being like, all right, you're an awesome shooter, we can use you as kind of that roamer and just last line of defense, and the rare occasions that Victor does get beat, you can play off ball, you can do that kind of play finishing stuff, add some floor spacing, add more size. It's not a bad shout. At 8, would I love it? Yeah, I don't know, but
you can tell me I'm stupid
as a fit.
I don't care if you tell me I'm stupid. Like that's all good because we all know we're going to get things wrong, right? Like, and
for sure.
The guy that you have at 8th and the guy that I have at 8th might be completely different, and the guy who ends up as the 8th best player in this class might get picked 30th. Like it's all over the shop. So, and I think this is one of those drafts where like have your reasons, have your ideas, have your perception of a player, and we'll see because this has got so many ways that all of this stuff can go. I guess the only advantage that someone like Solan has over Tyler Smith in this scenario is he's mates with Victor, and that might give him that little bit of an edge in that spot. But this is I think it's not necessarily or just about me with Tyler. It's about the player. Like a big guy who shoots, and there's weak side defensive shot blocking ability, which you need someone else next to you to help. But that player becomes that sort of a guy where go, man, I wish we could do this. I wish I had this guy that would fit in perfectly next to my big defensive guy, my usage guards. Who's that guy that fits? And that's where I am with him. But that's enough on him because, again, I could talk about him all day. We've got a bunch of other guys we need to talk about. We'll get to them in a sec. And it's interesting to see different. I love the different perspectives in this class, and I'm just going to be like there are going to be guys that maybe you even have them high that I'm going to be like, hey, for example, where are you with Donovan Clingan?
Oh boy, I have him at 4.
Okay, so I've got him at like 12, right? Because I just go, okay, he's fine. He protects the rim, but could I get 85% from Kal-El Ware maybe, or another center next season? Is he got enough switchability or offense to be picked out? Like I just don't know. But he could turn out to be awesome. He could be this great next level rim protector who does have offensive upside. But there's just so many ways that all this stuff can go that it's going to be a pretty wild draft, I think, when we get down to it in the end. But a lot of these shows that I've done, Tyler, we haven't had many young players have been like, oh, here's a 22-and-a-half-year-old 6'8" wing who averaged 20 points per 40 minutes and shot 36% from 3. And I went, oh, cool, another one. That's cool. But we're going to talk about another young player, which is a rarity. We're going to go to Minnesota, who, don't know the last time they had an NBA player there. Was it Daniel Laturo? Is he Minnesota? I think he was.
Yep.
Wow.
He was.
So
Amir Coffey.
Oh, was he? Oh, okay. So they were Minnesota and
Absolutely.
Clipper teammates. Interesting. I don't know about Coffey because he was undrafted, so I know more the colleges are the guys that end up getting drafted. Daniel Laturo, tanking legend. We're talking Cam Christie though, because he's young. He's still not 19, so he's in that group with a Solan, with a Topic, with a guy that I just spoke about and I can't remember. Pacom Dadier, who's not even 19 yet. 6'5" wing, under 20 usage, shot 60% 3-point attempt rate. Didn't get to the line much. 15 points per 40 minutes, 3 assists. The numbers overall, that they're not going to wow you here, but this is a young, sized wing guard who has that, I guess, potential to develop into a solid shooting, scoring option. And I've been seeing Christie get a bit of buzz recently. Where are you at with him, Tyler?
Really intrigued. Honestly, just have him like mid-second round-ish right now, mid to late. I'm really surprised that he's at least still in at this point. Withdrawal deadline is Wednesday. Not sure when this is coming out, so we'll either know if he's fully in or not by maybe the time that the show comes out.
I would say that we will know by the time this show comes out. I think this is out. This will be out like the day after. So that's the problem with doing these prospects, is that this deadline, this withdrawal deadline, is just too late to get all the prospects in.
No, it's fine. That if he comes back to school, then people are just getting an extra early preview on next season.
Exactly.
So I'm based out of Minnesota, so I've gotten to see Christie in person a couple times, and I really like him. I think he's going to be a really good player down the road. I'm just not sure he's physically ready for the NBA. And one of the determining factors we see so much with, especially these young guys, being able to get minutes and get opportunity outside of just random minutes in the G League, is, are they strong enough? Can they just physically withstand NBA minutes and NBA time? And a lot of the time they can't. The NBA it's a great place for guys to really develop and really physically develop and get in those strength and conditioning programs. But if they can't also get the opportunity to improve their game and slow it down mentally and adjust to the pace and the physicality and all of that, then it doesn't really mean anything. And we just see them kind of filter out and disappear before we know it. And I'm really afraid that that's what's going to happen to Christie. If he stays in, then I think there's probably a strong chance that he has a promise in the top 40, which will probably mean he has some sort of multi-year contract to some extent. I think the upside with him is really fascinating, though, because at a minimum, the kid can shoot. He can shoot the crap out of the ball. Some of the prettiest mechanics I've seen in person. And he's another one of these guys, kind of similar to Carrington, where being that kind of on-ball pick-and-roll creator and getting to his spots, especially in the mid-range, it just got better throughout the year. The game slowed down for him. He got to his spots. He got more comfortable creating contact and creating that space and rising up in the mid range and traffic and being really unaffected by it. So the big thing with him is, what do you do when the shot's not falling? And the passing, all of that the defense, it got better throughout the season, but it's still not where it needs to be necessarily a first round guy. Again, in this draft, there are 60 guys who could go in the first round, so you never know. But the inconsistencies when he ran off the line, when he was rushed, when he was really put under pressure, it was kind of glaring. So I think he needs just one more year, but I love the long-term upside with him.
I love that phrase. I use it all the time when talking, especially about the fantasy value of players. It's like, when the shot doesn't go in, what the hell else are you doing? Like, that's great. You can have a run where you shoot 55% from three, but you're not going to do it all the time. That's just not going to happen, right? So it's going to come back. But what else are you doing? Are you driving? Are you cutting? Are you defending? Are you passing? Are you doing something? Because if you're not, then I don't care, because you're not going to get minutes. You're not going to get that consistency. And that's a problem. Now, this also leads me into a bigger question, I guess. And you mentioned about guys. Well, actually, no, I'll get to that in a second, because I don't know how my brain works on this, and I'll look at this and I prepare all this stuff and I go through and look at Christie and look at these numbers, and then you say one little thing and I go, that sort of sounds like BJ Boston. And I don't know if that's like what he is as a player, but there's just little things go, Brandon Boston, big time recruit, didn't do much at Kentucky, late second round pick, flashed the Clippers, no opportunity. And I just don't know where he goes from here. And there is always that worry with that. But then that leads me to our next point. You talk about development. Now, I've been watching a lot more and getting into a lot more baseball recently. People who listen to this show would know that. And you see baseball, and these guys don't come in and really play, and they're 23, they're 24, because they understand the difficulty of the game. They understand the league and the system, the minor system, is set up for these guys to be in the system for 5 years, develop, learn, and when they're ready, they're ready. As a general thing here, not necessarily about Christie, but it does tie into Cam Christie. The way that the G League works, I think, sort of doesn't allow for teams to have this long-range developmental idea, and I think that development works way better in the NBA than in a college environment, but the G League just isn't set up that way. So ideally, you'd pick Cam Christie. He could sit in the G League for 3 years, 4 years, but the problem is that the way that contracts are set up, by the time that ends, is like you have to then pay him his next deal, and what are you going to do with that? Whereas it should be a situation where we can have these guys, the G League expands out rosters, there's more NBA integration, we see him work and work and work, and then he does that for 2 or 3 years, and then he pushes up. Do you agree with that assessment that would improve the washout rate and actually accelerate the development of these guys versus some of these players who come in, they're not ready, they get discarded, and then they're done?
Yeah, I do, because in theory, that's what the G League is for.
Yes,
but every year we see teams not willing to use those resources, that whether it's time or money or whatever, they're just not willing to do it. And I get it.
Part of it is they just don't have enough guys there. Like they have
Exactly.
They have 3 players there of a 12-man roster. So the team's like, if my thing has always been for like 4 or 5 years, your G League team, everyone is on your roster. You have all 10 of those guys. They are all your players. So you can develop them how you want. Every one of them. You sign veterans to do certain things, but the G League is, let's be fair, like it's not there to I can't wait to see the Skyforce win the title. That's not what it's there for. It's there to watch basketball in certain things, to watch players develop, to watch guys graduate through. But if you've got 2 players who are two-way guys on that team, who cares? Like I don't care if I'm going to watch the Windy City Bulls and Henri Drell is out there. Like I don't care. But if I've picked these guys who are 18, 19, they sit there, they develop, they play. The back end of your NBA rotation, your 11th man is a 27-year-old veteran who can step in and play when needed. Like I think the whole system is off in terms of how we use this, because if two-way guys go down to the G League, I don't care, and this is what I do. Like I just don't care to watch that. I just think that that sort of a player is the perfect guy that could sit there and then become that star, and he's 22 and he's dominated the G League. Now, all right, now it's time. Now he can actually jump up, step in, immediately be a 6th man, and then we're ready to go.
Yeah, and that's always why I kind of tend to push back when I see people be like, yeah, he's young, he's raw, just go get drafted, just go get reps in the G League. It's like the success rate for those guys is so small because the G League isn't or for most teams. There are some teams who do it really well, like Miami and OKC and Minnesota with Leonard Miller and Ousmane Dieng and, Duncan Robinson. Like we have seen success stories. And some of those are still TBD, but the vast majority of front offices don't have the time or the job security to be like, all right, let's take a swing on this guy and, put him in the G League for 3 years and then see what he's like. It's like, no, because odds are you're not going to have a job by that time. So why would they care? Instead, let's trade the second round pick for a veteran who we can throw in as a ninth man or whatever. So whenever I see, guys kind of saying that these freshmen should just go get drafted and get in the G League, it's like, well, no, unless you're getting a first round promise, I don't think that's the best route to do it, because that first round contract gets you that extra year of guaranteed money. Then it's like the team saying, all right, we're willing to invest in you somewhat. And the times that we've seen it mostly work out or kind of make the most sense is when there are these teams with these deep rosters and they take a guy in the middle of the first round and send him down to the G League to actually play and get reps and then still have them up around the team. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if guys are going in the mid to late second round and that's their plan, I think the odds are really, really small that they ever kind of make it.
And the thing that's, I think, frustrating for me and probably for you as well is that it doesn't have to be. Like, it could be very different. It does require a mindset change, a little bit more investment in certain areas, but it could actually be awesome to do that. But that is, like, honestly something I could talk about for, again, so much time. Let's come down here to Australia. Let's come down to Melbourne. Although I think at the end of the season, he moved back and played a couple of games in Germany. I feel like Ariel Hukporti has been around for 20 years. I have heard this guy's name for that long. I believe last season he played for Melbourne and blew out his Achilles at the start of the season. He's just, I don't know. He's just this guy that just seems to always be around, but now we're finally getting him in the draft. He's German, Togolese, who played in Australia. He's 7'4", somehow he's only 22, but he averaged 16 rebounds per 40 minutes with 3.5 blocks. Only played 18 minutes, 20 usage. Not going to space the floor, but he's big, he's strong, he rebounds, he blocks shots. And back to that earlier discussion about a Donovan Klinger. He's not Donovan Klinger, obviously, but these are the sort of guys that can come in and fill 18, 20 minutes and be an interesting big man that develops, maybe along the lines of like a Dayron Sharp even in Brooklyn, who's taken a little bit of time, but you can feel okay bringing him in at times. Where are you at with Hukporti? Am I crazy that he has been like discussed in draft circles for like 5 years? I feel like he's been around forever.
He has been around forever. And, just for the sake of transparency, I have been out on Hukporti for basically about as long as he's been around, up until this year. I thought he was fantastic for Melbourne this year. And I just continue to be shocked that he's just never mentioned in the draft conversation. I'm not saying he should be a first rounder, but in the second round, I think that's incredible value. And the upside with him isn't astronomical. He's not going to be this franchise changing, center, but can he give you 15 to 20 minutes of really high level and quality and consistent backup center play? I think so. We've seen how athletic he is for years. He showed that all this year. His ability to run the floor in transition was phenomenal, whether it's to finish with the lob at a full sprint or get deep post positioning and then, finish over one shoulder or the other. I thought it all was really, really sound. And just in the half court as a solid screener and rim runner, some passing flashes out of the short roll, nothing that's going to be like, all right, we're going to run our offense through Hukporti. That's not who he is. But as a really low maintenance, play finishing, reliable defender, I love his upside as just a backup center. And I know that's not the sexiest sales pitch necessarily, but if you can get that in the second round, you're getting an absolute steal. And then the what really sold me on him this year was just the growth on defense. His defensive playmaking and his shot blocking has always been fun. The highlights have always been ecstatic. And they were again this year, but the consistency in the drop coverage, that ability to kind of play that cat and mouse game, to stunt and recover and do all the little things that we see from guys who end up making it. I thought it was all there this year. So I just really love what you could get from him in the second round.
There's not many people who are 7 foot tall around. Like, that's simple as that. There's just not many of these people that exist in the world, and he does have this strength as well associated with it, and you're coming back off an Achilles injury to play the way that he did. I think he's really impressive as well. And like often with these devastating type lower body injuries, it can be a 24-month recovery to get back to your full self, which is really encouraging as well to see what he did this year, like a 12 months removed from that, and then step back even further in years to come. Like he's, again, we're not expecting an all-star, we're not expecting a starter, but like a guy that fills in, plays 22 minutes, splits time with other centers, does a impression of it Ivica Zubats for limited backup minutes and just protects the rim and finishes and screens and be strong and grabs boards. Like that's all really useful in certain parts. And like for a name that's been around forever, like nobody is talking about him now that he's finally going to be in the draft. It wouldn't be a draft show, Tyler, unless I talked about an old 50-year player who scored a lot for a smaller school. So we're going to go to Enrique Freeman from Akron. 5 years for Akron. Started basically 4 of those. Averaged about 18, 19 points per game this season. He is old, but he's 6'7", 24 points per 40 minutes, 27 usage. I don't really know what to make of this guy. Like, doesn't take threes, but he's only 6'7", but still scores and scores really efficiently. Like, this feels a little bit of a college artifact of just the guy that just gets buckets, but I don't really know where it makes sense in the NBA.
Yeah, he's funky. And when we look at kind of all the combine and pre-draft process with Portsmouth and the G League camp and the combine, I think he was the biggest winner. Okay. The people I've talked to have been really, really happy with his performance during those camps. And then you just kind of look at his numbers. Like you said, 6'7", senior center. Not a great sales pitch because it's like, all right, you're too small to play center in the NBA. You're just not big enough. That's not who you're going to be. But he was kind of this prototypical mid-major center where he was the biggest guy on his team. So he just kind of got put at center. So despite that, his numbers were absolutely bonkers this year, where effective field goal rate over 60, offensive rebounding rate over 10, defensive rebounding rate over 30, block rate of just under 6. I mean, at 6'7", to have those rebounding numbers, those shot blocking numbers, and that kind of at rim that scoring efficiency, despite not taking a whole lot of threes, that's really encouraging. And one of the things that translates from level to level with incredible accuracy is rebounding and defensive playmaking. And there really weren't that many players better than Freeman in the country at those two things. So is he a center in the NBA? No. He's going to have to play a 4. And it's going to be really kind of interesting to see how he fits in, because this was the first year he ever started shooting threes, really. Only 52 attempts this year, so really low volume, but up to 36.5%. And when we look at indicators like free throw percentage, just under 73. So I don't think he's going to be this big time lights out shooter, but if he can knock down 33 to 36% of his NBA threes, whether he's spotting up in the corner or hitting an occasional pick and pop, and then providing the rebounding stuff, the foul drawing, the defensive versatility, that's where it's like, all right, there's just a spot in rotations for those guys. We see it with Jared Vanderbilt. We see it with Tamani Kamara. I'm not saying he's a 1-for-1 with those guys, but I think there's that type of archetypal mode and upside with him.
For those who can't see on the screen, listening on audio, like he averaged 16.5 rebounds per 40 minutes. He averaged 2.2 blocks per 40 minutes, a steal, 24 points. Like, these are crazy numbers. 57% free throw rate. The other guy that you mentioned, Vanderbilt, you mentioned Kamara, but we saw a 6'6" guy who didn't really do much scoring-wise, but just hustle, rebound, defensively, have some real success for a significant period of time in PJ Tucker in the NBA. Now, obviously, he comes in as a high-usage player here, Freeman, but like that ability to position yourself and be a defensive guy and grab boards at that size, PJ was able to do that as well. And there are countless examples of these players who have to mold their game to be something different to what it was in college. And most of the successful role players in the NBA are college stars. Like, that's just how that works. And you can scale it down. And he's got the building blocks in place to focus on that as being what he brings to an NBA team. Now, the likelihood of it working out, so obviously usually going to be pretty low, but there are a few really interesting things there with Freeman and said it's interesting that scouts are talking quite a bit about how he's played, because that sort of, again, role player guy that fits into different spots is usually pretty valuable. We've got one more guy we're going to talk about here, and we're going to go to Connecticut. We're going to go to Alex Karaban, who is a guy that, again, he feels like he's been in college for 50 years as well, but he hasn't. He's only 21. I guess it's part of the exposure that UConn gets through being great. He's 6'8". He averaged almost 18 and 7 per 40, over a steal and a block, 31 minutes, low usage player, which is a little bit of a worry to me when a guy is a low usage player in college and where that translates through to the NBA. Really strong efficiency numbers. Is he going to be a low usage sort of spot up shooter type of a player? The size is there. He's not as old as you think. Like, is he going to be just one of those real solid second round Pat Connaughton-ish type players who just sort of fills that gap?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I kind of get like George Niang, like Jared Dudley kind of type vibes from him, because I like the physicality he plays with. The rebounding numbers are fine. They're not outlandish, but he's really good team defender and boxes out a ton. Like you said, really efficient scorer on high volume from outside, where 10.5 threes per 100 possessions at just under 38%. That's awesome. I love that. And then you look at just kind of the spot up stuff, and he's in the 82nd percentile, 74th percentile in transition. Is he ever going to create his own shot? No. Is he ever going to play make for others? No. But can he be a reliable team defender, consistent rebounder, and just knockdown shooter? I think so. It'll be really fascinating to see if he decides to stay in this draft or go back. I wouldn't be surprised if he returns to Connecticut next year and just kind of like you said, ups that usage a little bit, continues to play in their system, continues to be incredibly efficient, and then just maybe, works his way into the first round for next year. But like we talked about with Tyler Smith, obviously Karaban's a different player, but we kind of know who he is, and there's a comfort level and a certain floor on that type of player that makes it really, it's not the sexiest pick. It's not, it's kind of like taking an offensive guard in the NFL draft, where it's like, God, that wide receiver would have been fun, but we just kind of need this guy, and he's going to make the floor of our lineup better, and he's going to contribute off the bench, and he's probably going to be one of these guys that plays in the NBA for 8 to 10 years and just contributes to winning basketball by doing a whole bunch of little things without ever really popping off of the box score on a nightly basis.
I went on to the Wizzy player comparison, and I mistakenly, because I said it, typed in Pat Connaughton, right, as the name, and the first name that came up as a similarity to Pat Connaughton was Alex Karaban. I thought, okay, that's really interesting. And then I typed in Karaban, and the names that came up were AJ Griffin, Trey Murphy, Pat Connaughton, and then we get to like DJ Wilson, Isaiah Livers, who are low usage players who just didn't work out in the NBA. So that's a little bit of a concerning thing there. But just a lot of these guys who just, the Trey Murphy ones, obviously, like if that happens, that's awesome. You love that. But just these guys, again, that just filling in the gaps and being solid and taking a lot of threes, and they go in and being efficient. And that's also really, really valuable. But yeah, I do think there is a pretty significant chance he does go back to school, plays at Connecticut one more year. He's probably just, as most of these guys do, go back to school, and not much changes with his draft stock, but we'll see in terms of a stronger year next year as well. But just one of those players that wherever he's picked, he'll be that guy that everyone's like, how did he fall to 40? How did he fall to 39? Why did we all sleep on Andrew Nembhard, Jalen Brunson, Trace Jackson Davis, whoever it is, just someone who just does stuff without the exciting upside. And at points in the draft, like that becomes more important for us. And that, Tyler, is the end of us discussing these NBA draft prospects. I know that you've got a draft guide coming out over at No Ceilings, but that's for the whole of you guys. What about you individually? What have you got cranking out at the moment with the No Ceilings machine?
Just we got stuff going up every day. If you enjoy written stuff on the draft, Monday through Friday over at NoCeilingsNBA.com. Last week, I wrote about why I think Stephen Castle could be the best player from this draft. This Friday, I will have something on Enrique Freeman. We will have a draft guide coming out in the near future. the vast majority of our stuff is free. So go over to NoCeilingsNBA.com, check it out. No Ceilings NBA podcast, YouTube, socials, all that good stuff. And there is a paid tier if you enjoy some intel, private Discord channel, some subscriber specific pieces, all that good stuff.
Go and check it out. I can't wait to get that email to tell me that the No Ceilings draft guide is out so I can get it. And then like I did last year, printed it out, got it bound, had it sitting on my desk, always ready to flick through and read about all these prospects. Really looking forward to it, Tyler. I always look forward to you coming on and chatting about the draft with me. Thanks again for coming on and talking about those guys.
Appreciate it.
And that brings us to the end of another draft prospect show. We're getting through all these guys now. Not many left as we cover all these players. Mock drafts will be coming up soon. More team review stuff coming up in the coming days also. But for now, what I want you to do is thumb it up, ring a bell, tell your friends, and have a great day. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.